when I was thinking about what to say, I thought, most of the people in this room have seen a version of what we're doing in the city. But then I looked at the list, and that's not entirely true. So to about a third of the people who've seen this before, you're going to get it again. I really am excited at how many new faces there are here. The sustainability of what the Code for America Fellows are doing in Chicago lives or dies based on community involvement and taking things forward. So I want to talk a little bit about how we treat various ideas in the city and turn them into platforms. So the city, it turns out, is actually pretty good at that. Actually, so maybe wouldn't my son mouse? I'll beep. All right, so the stockyards, right? Beep. You just hit that space bar. Oh, there you go. Okay, so that was a pretty, simple idea, but it gave rise to all kinds of other innovations. The transnational rail network, which gave rise to the notion of time zones, because you had to have these things run on time, which gave rise to refrigerated train cars, which gave rise to the options in the futures market that were developed here. All these things from a sort of a simple idea. Go ahead. We think that way in the city. Go ahead. There are lots of ideas that gave rise to other things in the sense of a platform. So we were once the most trafficked railway hub. You may not know that actually the most internet traffic by volume transits Chicago precisely because of the rights of way that the trains laid and the fiber that goes along those lines. Go ahead. We have the nation's largest medical district, and just about a month and a half ago, the largest health information exchange was launched, not by the city, but linking those clinicians and providers together. Go ahead. Something I'll talk about very briefly at the end, I will claim that this is at the center of architectural innovation. And one of the things that we're thinking about in the city is how do we extend that to a kind of primacy in information architecture in the city. Go ahead. So just very quickly about what we do at the city, and Brett Goldstein, the Chief Data Officer, is here as well, Danielle DeMero, Audrey Mathis, a bunch of folks from the city. It's about open data. And initially, the mayor was really focused on these first two, right? Publishing the vital signs of the city in the sort of classic sense of transparency to build trust, to use it for accountability, so performance metrics and those sorts of things. But where we've really pushed it is in analysis, analytics, that is, to pull out patterns and trends to help us do things better, to show us correlations and identify, points for intervention. And then the last one, which I think is really very new, you're starting to see civic startups. So basically, the evolution of civic development, people saying, I can actually make some money building businesses and applications on top of the open data that the city's doing. So you don't have to go through the RFP process. You're actually adding value at the periphery of government. Go ahead. So you may know about this, and I hope you use this today. There's all kinds of other data resources at JMP/Chicago Data, but this is one of them. Go ahead. It's Socrata. It's a cloud-based open data portal. Go ahead. We've got all kinds of data in there, different tools for visualizing it. This is a map, average daily traffic counts, but most of the data in there is numeric and tabular. Go ahead. This is actually a little outdated. I think we're at like 310 or 311. But just goes to show that this is a very widely accessed, much used set of data, and yet as we go around the city and talk to sort of community groups, and this is just something to keep in mind as you're thinking about applications today, it's still not all that useful to people sort of at street level doing neighborhood work. It's one of the things that we're working on now that we've kind of operationalized data publication, basically pushing it down to the departments as just standard operating procedure, is what are the tools that will actually allow a community group or a church group that knows in their gut that there's useful, actionable information here, but they're not statistics folks, right? They don't understand information visualization. So how do we build tools that make the data in here actionable? To the first one about transparency, you may know about Plow Tracker. It's been a very weird winter, so this hasn't been on all that often. But this is the idea of taking stuff that we already capture. We've been managing the fleet of plows by GPS for years, and just saying, you know, why not put that online? And when this launched, it annihilated the previous record for website traffic to cityofchicago.org, leaving the former #1, which was the blizzard of last year, sort of in its wake. And that was really kind of surprising to me. I guess we had been so focused on the analytics and the sort of business development aspect of open data that we lost sight of the fact that just being able to peer into how government works, in this case seeing where the plows go, still is a very valuable thing. So, you know, you can't lose sight of the transparency aspect of it. One thing I'll note here, and as you're thinking about what to do with data, easily as important as this is the context about what you're seeing. You know, one of the things when we're talking to streets and sanitation is, you know, if someone were to take a snapshot of this map right when the plows were being deployed, you know, it would show a bunch of plows in like 4 wards or 5 wards where the garages are. And, you know, you know, there'd be a story written about it and whatnot. So, but you know, it's understood there's a rational reason for that. You know, the plows don't just drop from the sky. And so that context is really key. And I think a lot about that too. In addition to tools for understanding, how do we use this data how do we pair it with storytelling and narrative and context without prejudicing the data itself? Go ahead. Adopt a sidewalk. This is a real success story for the Code for America Fellows. Last year in Boston, when the fellows arrived, and I think they were working on like an education project or something, there was a blizzard there. And they developed something called Adopt a Hydrant. So it allowed you to just claim a fire hydrant and basically shovel it out for the season. One of the great things about what's developed in Code for America is that it's reusable. And I think one of the futures of civic development, or municipal development actually, is sharing across cities. I mean, we're all solving the same problems more or less. So we took it and created Adopt a Sidewalk, which was a much thornier problem in the sense of instead of points, you've got polygons here and a map of city sidewalks that didn't exist. But Brett figured out how to do it, extending the parcel lines to the curb line and putting this in. And basically, you claim your sidewalk, which one of the reasons for doing this is we get lots of calls to the 311 after a snow event saying, when are you coming to shovel my sidewalk? Well, the city doesn't shovel sidewalks. You know, and it's also kind of, you know, you get a bad rap in the suburbs here. You know, people talking about throwing, you know, our lawn furniture into shoveled out parking spots and things like that. And it's like, let's take that sort of claiming ethos and put it in a way that sort of, you know, there's almost some game mechanics around this, right? If it ever snows again, substantially, it'll be interesting to see, you know, this side of the block versus that side of the block. And you could even imagine things like, we know how much it snows, we know how wide the sidewalk is, you could actually calculate how much snow is getting shoveled. Go ahead. Performance metrics, this is the accountability piece, go ahead. So every week we're updating sort of key metrics of the city. So this isn't data so much as, go ahead, I'll show you an example here. How anything that touches a resident or a business. So that's most of the city, but you know, average time to get a business license, average time to get a pothole filled, go ahead. This is average days to complete pothole repair requests over the summer. The dotted line is what CDOT's aiming for and how they're doing. And these are, you know, so we've got about 9 months of this now, go ahead. Which permits us to do the real work, right? Which is changing the business processes internally based on this stuff, which, you know, really didn't exist before. So, you know, publishing that and being transparent is one thing. Actually now using that, we've got a team of folks funded by the Bloomberg Foundation, actually, that are taking that data to reduce what the mayor calls time in line. So any sort of interaction with the city, kind of trying to smooth that out. Go ahead. Thanks. Okay, so analytics, and really what this is pushing towards is a kind of cultural, I don't want to stop you tweeting if you're tweeting. That's okay. So getting at like the layer above data is creating tools for understanding, go ahead. Doing sort of financial fraud detection, for instance, applying analytics to stuff, go ahead. Social media, we are not using this piece of software, but I had no good visual because it's all just command line screenshots from Brett's desk. But you know, basically taking Twitter in aggregate and trying to figure out, I mean, the low-hanging fruit is sentiment analysis, but what we're really trying to do is classify tweets, let's say with CTA or for service requests, such that a significant sort of corpus of information can trigger a service request. So basically, sort of passive sensing of what needs doing. If a tree is down on Addison or something like that, and enough people mention it, that should across the threshold, that should trigger at least an inquiry from the city. Go ahead. And then really what we're aiming at here is something called the Neighborhood Health Index, which is a way of taking block level or at least neighborhood level indicators and allowing us to do predictive analytics, right, for various unwanted outcomes. So this has been done in police departments for a while to prevent violent crime or at least intercede. We're looking at this from the perspective of anything that is not good for a neighborhood: joblessness, foreclosure, blight. This is not finished yet, but it really is the focus of our work. Go ahead. And it's the flip side of something we call the Common Operations Platform. So this is CTA's command center. CTA has something like this. Obviously, emergency management has things like this. But what doesn't exist actually is just the emergency that is, or the almost emergency that is running the city every day, right? No holistic way of seeing all the sort of spatial data in the city at once. And that's the flip side of the Neighborhood Health Index, right? It's the same data. One is analytics. The other is basically real time that allows the heads of the water department or CTA or CDOT to coordinate, collaborate. I mean, the obvious use case for this is, take a section of street and say, this looks like it's going to get ripped up 3 times in 3 months. Why don't we move the crews around so that you capitalize on knowing schedules and the status of very different departments. Go ahead. So this is just some of the work that we've done. This IdeaHack is one of them. Go ahead. This is a hack day that we had at Google. Last year we ran something called Apps for Metro Chicago with the state and the county. Very successful. Go ahead. We got some of the winners here. This is Pallavi's which won the placemaking award from the Metropolitan Planning Council. Basically, a way, I think of it as kind of a 24-hour town hall. This is Little Village. They're getting an ample piece of green space, which they sorely lack, and they really want to be involved in the process of defining what it becomes. And this app is for that, is for polling and feedback to the city and to the community groups so they can stay involved in what that park becomes. The reason I really love this, though, is that it can be used for so many other things. And you should talk to Pallavi, she's sitting right there. How many sort of hyper-local, community-based developments are there going on around the city that could use a framework like this to stay involved and stay in touch? Chicago lobbyists, the developers are here. Derek, somewhere around here. Great example of taking really gnarly data and frankly boring and making it useful, right? This is the beginning of looking at influence, right? This is basically a visualization of influence. Who's the highest paid lobbyist? Who's paying them? Who's the most lobbied? And at chicagolobbyist.org, it's a front end. It's a tools for understanding. Go ahead. Scott Robbins here. This is Sweep Around Us. Super simple. It's one of those how the hell was this not built before? You put your address in, and it shows you the street sweeping area that you live in, and then the night before it happens, it'll text you, I think it's still texting, or email you to move your car, so you don't get a ticket. And this was repurposed actually for chicagoshovels.org into something called 2 inches. There's a 2-inch snow parking ban that can be activated in the city. And if you think about it, it's basically the same thing. You give it a point, it shows you if you're in that 2-inch parking ban area, and then alerts you to it. Code for America, you've already heard about that. We were very lucky to be one of the cities, just very quickly, trying to turn 311 into the platform that, say, CTA transit data is, right? The CTA doesn't really build apps, but they publish the data, and they have an API that, in their case, is read-only. That others can, that a sort of ecosystem of applications can be built upon. We'd like to do that with 311. The difference there is it's actually a read-write thing, so that you can submit, you can read, you can track dashboards and that sort of stuff. You'll hear a lot more about that over the coming year. Go ahead. Okay, end on this. The city literally as a platform. Go ahead. So, I won't go into this one, but, well, yes, I will. So, there's two interfaces in the city, right? There's the actual physical built world that we navigate and we understand. We weren't taught it, but you can tell people who live in a city, you can tell people who have learned it. It's the difference between a tourist walking down North Michigan Avenue in Chicago, and they walk differently. They understand the built environment differently. But then at any given moment, especially in a city, someone is probably navigating another interface too. In this case, a smartphone or an iPod or something like that. And they're layered on top of one another, hundreds of thousands of times a day. The communities of practice that build these things, so urban planners and architects on one side, built environment, and then designers, developers on the other, don't really interact. They're not talking. They're not designing in tandem. And you can make a pretty strong argument that the concept of the city or city making is easily as much about the maps that someone's navigating and the social networks that one is using to learn about the city as the built environment. Go ahead. So where do these two things come together? Think about how many, next time you walk down the sidewalk, think about how many IP addresses you're passing. There's quite a few networked public objects out in the public way. So we've got a public bike share coming. Will be installed by the end of the year. Some of the proposals, well, all of the stations have to be online. So that's an easy one. Some of the proposals we received, the bikes themselves are as well. We've got 4,500 parking meters. These are all networked computers. You've got big belly solar compactors, some of which have IP addresses. You've got, well, you've probably seen some of the CTA platforms now have interactive screens. There's like, I think, 2 interactive screens and then a lot of static ones. You're going to see a lot of movement on that in bus shelters. But the point, and then you've got everybody with their smartphones. The point is none of these things, go ahead, none of these things are talking. It is absolutely not a platform. They're disconnected. The bus shelter wayfinding screen has no idea how many bikes are available in the public bike share 2 stops on. And it's not open. It's not open in the sense of the data catalog. So this is thinking about the street and the network public objects as something that can be queried, certainly read from, possibly written to, in the same way that data.cityofchicago.org is. So just a kind of conceptual example, you may know that there's actually an SMS shortcode on all CTA signs. If you don't have a smartphone, you can just text that number, and it's unique for every stop, and it'll give you a list of upcoming buses. What I love about this is that conceptually, you're querying a public object. Now, obviously, you're not. You're sending an SMS. It's going over the network and all that stuff. But with things like OpenFare coming to CTA, which is basically contactless interaction with the turnstile and near-field communication and that sort of stuff, you can imagine a world where you are actually interacting with public objects in a sort of read-write way. Here's just a sort of a mock-up of what an actual kind of multi-touch wayfinding screen might look like in an urban milieu. So one of the things this is the end, but one of the things I keep in mind is this quote from William Gibson. Right when the iPad came out, he said we won't really know what the iPad's about until we see what the street decides to do with it. And we try to keep that in mind because this is so sort of anathema to the way software is developed. You have design principles. You know what you want it to do. You build it to spec and you judge it based on whether you hit that. But the great thing about the city actually is the ways that things are used in ways they weren't intended, and usually better, right? It's the sort of flexibility of the urban fabric. And so in thinking about that, in designing a public API, for instance, for the public way, and others, you do it in a way that does create boundaries, but also allows for innovation and things we never thought of. So that's it. Thank you for allowing me to speak to you.